What is next after Trump wins a second term? What happens to populism as the Republican Party looks ahead to the 2024 election and beyond? Let's start with this extraordinary article that appeared on the eve of the Republican convention a couple of weeks ago. The Grand Old Meltdown. What happens when a party gives up on ideas? It's written by Tim Alberta, chief political correspondent for Politico magazine. Here's a quote. "It can now safely be said, as his first term in the White House draws towards closure, that Donald Trump's party is the very definition of a cult of personality. It stands for no special ideal. It possesses no organizing principle." And again, a Republican collapse this fall, Biden wins the White House, Democrats flip the Senate and hold the House, would trigger a reckoning within the GOP. The efforts to expunge this ugly chapter of GOP history could commence with stunning ferocity. This is what people like John Kasich and Steve Schmidt and Nicole Wallace and George Will and all the never-Trumpers seem to think, that after Trump, the Republican Party is just going to fall back in line and obediently serve the big donors again. That once the aberration, as they see it, of Donald Trump is out of the way, we'll just go back to the establishment GOP.
I think it's important that the American people have these facts as they consider what to do in November and as we look at our history and see Trump for what I hope history will record it to be, an aberration.
What arrogance, what idiocy. What did they give us, these establishment Republicans? 2 unwon wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that killed over 400,000 people. Disastrous trade deals that sent millions of jobs overseas and gutted the heartland. Open borders that, as even Bernie Sanders used to say, destroyed jobs and lowered wages for the working class. And total surrender to the loony left campus authoritarians. So we now have the nightmare of Chairman Mao's cultural revolution right here in America. Woke mobs of hate-filled, puritanical zealots taking over the media, schools, corporate America, silencing dissent, crushing conservative thought, on the brink of destroying America. President Trump, the first Republican to actually stand up to them and fight for America. These never-Trumpers and establishment Republicans are utterly delusional if they think anyone except their smug friends in the media bubble want to go back to how it was before Trump. They're so shallow and superficial, they can't see beyond their own prejudice.
My Republican Party, it's not a party, it's a cult of personality.
The Republican Party has fully become a cult of personality.
The establishment Republicans, just like the establishment generally, totally underestimate this president. They idolize Obama because he talks like a college professor. But what did Obama actually achieve, intellectually speaking? He didn't change anyone's thinking. He had no big ideas. He had no ideas of any kind, really. In an unguarded moment, he admitted as much. One of the most shocking things I thought President Obama ever said was about the historical impact of a president. Here's how he saw it. Quote, "At the end of the day, we're part of a long-running story. We just try to get our paragraph right." As New York Times columnist Maureen Dowd said at the time, "Mr. President, I am just trying to get my paragraph right. You need to think bigger." President Trump does think bigger. He didn't come into office wanting to write a paragraph in the history book. He wanted to write a new chapter, even a new book. Look, no one would call Donald Trump an intellectual. I suspect he himself would consider it an insult. But ideas matter. Real power in politics is not just the office you hold and the policies you introduce. All of that is fleeting and temporary. Real power is when you change the way people think. You change the climate of opinion. You win the battle of ideas. That lasts way beyond the time you're in office. In my lifetime, I can think of only 3 political leaders anywhere in the world who actually did that. One was Margaret Thatcher in England when I was growing up. Another was Ronald Reagan, of course, her great partner here in America. And the third is Donald Trump. Now I know that the snooty elites will be snorting in derision to hear this president being mentioned in the same breath as Reagan and Thatcher. But think about it. Those leaders changed how people think, and it shaped policy and politics for decades after they left office. With the force of their will, they overturned the consensus of their day, on the role of government, the size of the state, the importance of free markets. And that's exactly what Donald Trump has done in his first term. He's overturned the establishment consensus on China, on endless war, and on trade and manufacturing. Before Trump, people said, we need to appease China. We need to be the world's policeman. Globalism is the future, so there's no point fighting it. After Trump, who thinks any Republican running for president in 2024 or 28 or 32 for that matter would get anywhere on a platform that is pro-China, that pushes foreign military engagement for some notion of America's role in the world, that takes the side of global corporations on trade and immigration instead of American workers? Forget about it. Trump has, in some cases pretty much single-handedly, given that he had the entire establishment against him, brought about a sea change in the intellectual climate. That is his lasting legacy. And that's the future after Trump. The new conservative populism we talk about here. Pro-business on tax and regulation, pro-worker on trade and immigration. Donald Trump has been understandably focused on the economy. He's a businessman after all. In 2016, the priority was jobs. And now, because of the virus and the shutdowns, it's the priority in 2022. But in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, the next generation of conservative populists will have the chance to broaden the vision. At the top of the show every week, we talk about being pro-worker, pro-family, pro-community, and pro-America. President Trump's conservative populism has certainly focused on the pro-worker and pro-America part. But smart thinkers in the conservative populist movement are looking ahead to the next revolution: stable families, strong communities, and more. We'll discuss some of that tonight. And above all, remember that President Trump's revolution is not an aberration. Positive populism is here to stay.